Loser. The neon green sticky note glared back at me from my computer monitor. 5 sets of eyes watched from behind cubicle walls, waiting for my reaction. Their quiet snickers filled the suddenly silent office space. I stood frozen, my morning coffee still warm in my hand, as my gaze moved from the childish block letters to their expectant faces. This was not the first time, just the most public, the most blatant. I placed my mug down with deliberate calm, peeled the note off with 2 fingers, and dropped it into my trash bin. Then I smoothed my tie, sat down at my desk, and began typing as if nothing had happened. But inside, something shifted. Not broke, shifted, like tectonic plates beneath the Earth's surface before a quake. I could feel Reginald Thorne watching me from his office, the ringleader, disappointed by my non-reaction. Beside him stood Clara Jenkins, his devoted second-in-command, whispering something that made him smile. Simon Cross and Chloe Miller pretended to work while stealing glances my way. Even Felix Cooper, the newest member of their little club, hovered nearby, eager to prove his loyalty to the established hierarchy. 6 months of this treatment, and they still expected tears or anger. They wanted a scene, validation that their tactics worked, that I was as pathetic as they decided. What they did not know was that I had stopped keeping track of their childish pranks weeks ago and started documenting something far more interesting. Something that would change everything. The office printer hummed to life, spitting out pages I had not authorized. I did not need to check to know what it was. Another joke, probably my resume plastered with unflattering comments or a mock performance review. Clara giggled as she collected the papers, passing them around like party favors. I continued typing, my fingers never pausing on the keyboard. What no one realized as they exchanged knowing glances was that my screen displayed not the quarterly report I was supposed to be finishing, but an email addressed to someone they had never met, someone whose name would strike terror into their hearts within 48 hours. I only needed to press send. Wait before I continue with what happened next. And trust me, you'll want to hear every detail of how this unfolds. If you are enjoying this story of workplace revenge, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that will have you cheering for justice. Drop a comment letting me know if you have ever dealt with office bullies and how you handled it. Now, let us get back to what happened after I found that loser sign. My name is Julian Vance, Senior Analytics Specialist. I was 48 years old, single by choice, and transferred to this regional branch 6 months ago when Aegis Enterprises acquired the company. I was sent here with a specific assignment: evaluate operational efficiency, streamline data protocols, and recommend improvements. What nobody told me was that I would be entering a hostile territory of employees led by a manager who saw me as a corporate threat. I grew up as the middle child between 2 loud, demanding siblings, which taught me to observe more than speak. This quiet watchfulness became my superpower. People tend to underestimate those who do not constantly broadcast their thoughts. They forget you are there. They forget you are listening. They forget you are connecting dots they did not even realize existed. Before the acquisition, this office operated like a separate kingdom. Reginald Thorne, the regional manager, had built his team over 8 years with people who were loyal to him personally rather than to the parent corporation. They had their routines, their inside jokes, and their unspoken rules. Then I arrived, an unwelcome reminder that they were now answerable to a larger corporate entity. The exclusion began immediately. Meeting invitations mysteriously failed to reach my inbox. Crucial information was shared during impromptu gatherings by the coffee machine just after I had left for lunch. My suggestions in team meetings were met with silence, then attributed to someone else minutes later to enthusiastic approval. I tried the standard approaches at first. I brought donuts on Fridays. I complimented their work. I stayed late to help with deadline crunches. Nothing broke through the invisible barrier. If anything, my efforts seemed to amuse them. Further evidence of my desperation to belong. He is trying so hard, I overheard Chloe say one afternoon. It is kind of sad. The day I stopped trying to win their approval was the day I truly began to see them not as potential colleagues, but as subjects of observation. I started noticing patterns. Discrepancies between report numbers and actual results. Client complaints that vanished without resolution. Projects marked complete that had not delivered promised outcomes. At first, I thought it was just inefficiency, the kind of departmental laziness that develops when no one is watching closely. But 3 months in, I spotted something that made me pay closer attention. Two different versions of the same report with numbers that did not match. Just a draft, Reginald explained when I casually mentioned it. Always double-check with me before using any reports for your analysis. His smile did not reach his eyes. That night, I began keeping separate notes, not about their social slights, but about these discrepancies. I worked later than everyone else, giving me access to files they thought no one would examine. I volunteered for administrative tasks they considered beneath them, which gave me legitimate reasons to access databases they thought were their private domain. What they did not realize was that I was compiling a detailed record of corporate misconduct. Meanwhile, the bullying escalated. My presentation slides were altered minutes before client meetings. My name was removed from project contributions. Someone changed my desktop wallpaper to an unflattering photo they had taken when I was eating lunch alone. The breaking point should have been the day. Reginald took credit for my cost-saving proposal. I had spent weeks developing it, analyzing 3 years of operational data to identify unnecessary expenditures. I had submitted it directly to him as required. When the quarterly review came, he presented it as his own work with one crucial difference. My projected savings of $2,300,000 had been downsized to $800,000. We do not want corporates setting unrealistic expectations, he told me afterward, noticing my surprise. I did you a favor. Better to underpromise and overdeliver. But I knew the real reason. The full amount would have raised questions about why these inefficiencies had persisted under his management for so long. I said nothing. I smiled and thanked him for the advice. And that night, I added this incident to my growing file. I knew his actions constituted a clear breach of fiduciary duty to Aegis Enterprises. By altering financial projections and misrepresenting operational data to secure personal bonuses, he was engaging in what could legally be defined as corporate fraud. I spent my evenings matching these actions with appropriate legal doctrines. The deliberate manipulation of performance metrics to mislead corporate leadership violated several internal compliance policies and fell under the doctrine of breach of fiduciary duty. I documented everything carefully, ensuring every claim was backed by hard data, timestamps, and server logs. I knew that when the time came, these findings would serve as a powerful tool to protect both myself and the company from further damage. By the morning of the loser sign, my documentation had become substantial. I had not planned to act on it yet. I needed more conclusive evidence for certain patterns I had observed. But something about that green sticky note, the culmination of months of petty cruelty, crystallized my resolve. They thought they knew me. They thought I was weak because I did not fight back. They had confused patience with passivity, observation with obliviousness. During lunch, when they all went out together as usual, I stayed behind. I organized my findings into a clear, dispassionate analysis, focusing on 3 key areas: systematic misreporting of performance metrics, inconsistent client billing practices, and what appeared to be deliberate obstruction of post-acquisition integration efforts. I wrote the email carefully, addressing it to Eleanor Caldwell, Chief Operations Officer at Aegis Enterprises headquarters. I had never met her, but I knew her reputation for zero tolerance of operational inefficiency. My message was professional, factual, and completely devoid of personal grievance. I included spreadsheets with highlighted discrepancies, screenshots of altered reports, and a timeline of integration obstacles I had encountered. I ended with, I believe these issues reflect intentional dysfunction and a serious breach of fiduciary duty rather than mere incompetence. I have developed a recovery strategy that could salvage the division's potential value to Aegis Enterprises. I am available at your convenience to discuss further details. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I crossed this line, there would be no going back. These people had made my professional life miserable for months. But was I really prepared for what might happen next? As I contemplated my decision, Reginald emerged from his office, walking toward my desk with that familiar, condescending smile. Over his shoulder, I could see Clara watching with anticipation, Something new was coming my way. "Julian," he said, leaning against my desk uninvited. "The team and I were talking. We are concerned that you seem unhappy here. Maybe this position is not the right fit for your particular skills." Translation: they were planning to push me out. "Actually," I replied, meeting his gaze directly, "I have been thinking the same thing. This arrangement does not seem to be working as intended." Relief flashed across his face. "I am glad we are on the same page. I can talk to human resources about finding you a different placement within Aegis Enterprises, somewhere more suitable." "That is thoughtful of you," I said, my hand moving to my mouse. "But I have already taken initiative on finding a solution." I clicked send. "What does that mean?" Reginald asked, his smile faltering slightly. I looked up at him with a smile of my own. "It means I am finally participating in the company culture you have created here. I am being proactive about improving our situation." He left my desk confused rather than concerned. He had no reason to worry. Not yet, but within 24 hours that would change dramatically. I packed up at exactly 5 o'clock in the afternoon, nodding politely to the team as I left. They watched me go with the satisfied expressions of predators who believe their prey is weakening. What they did not realize was that prey, when cornered, can become surprisingly dangerous, and I was no longer cornered. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line made my heart skip. Operational concerns at Western Regional Branch. I opened it, standing perfectly still in the parking lot as I read Eleanor's 3-line response. "Julian, extremely concerning information. Do not discuss with anyone on site. I will be there tomorrow with the audit team. Continue as normal. Delete this email after reading." I looked back at the office building where lights still burned on our floor. They had no idea what was coming, and neither did I. The next morning I arrived early, at 7:15 in the morning, well before anyone else typically showed up. I wanted time to prepare myself mentally for whatever the day might bring. The office was eerily quiet, the overhead lights not yet fully activated by motion sensors. I moved through the dim space to my desk, feeling strangely calm despite the storm I knew was approaching. I powered up my computer and began my normal routine. By 8:30, Simon arrived, barely glancing my way as he settled at his desk. Chloe and Felix came in together at 8:45, whispering and stopping abruptly when they saw me. Clara strutted in at 9 o'clock sharp, coffee in hand, giving me a once-over before disappearing into Reginald's office. "He is acting weird today," I heard Chloe murmur to Felix. "Too quiet." "Probably planning his resignation letter," Felix replied with a snort. If they only knew what I was actually planning, absolutely nothing. The wheels were already in motion, and I simply needed to wait. At 10:17 in the morning, Reginald's phone rang. I watched through his glass office partition as he answered, his expression shifting from professional pleasantness to confusion. Then unmistakable alarm. He stood up abruptly, pacing as he spoke, running his hand through his hair repeatedly. When he hung up, he immediately called Clara in. Their conversation was animated but hushed. Clara's normally confident posture crumpled slightly as Reginald spoke. She kept shaking her head, then nodding vigorously. When she emerged, her complexion had paled considerably. "Everything okay?" Simon called out, asking if she was fine. "Fine," she snapped uncharacteristically sharp. "Just corporate stuff. Nothing important." But her trembling hands told a different story as she furiously typed at her computer. By lunchtime, the atmosphere had grown tense. The usual group lunch was canceled without explanation. Instead, Reginald called an impromptu team meeting, excluding me. I ate my sandwich at my desk, watching them through the glass walls of the conference room. Reginald spoke intensely, occasionally pointing at documents spread across the table. The others leaned forward, their expressions growing increasingly distressed. Chloe appeared to be on the verge of tears. Felix kept shaking his head in disbelief. Simon stared blankly at the wall, his face ashen. Only Clara maintained some composure, taking furious notes and occasionally interrupting Reginald with questions or comments. At 2:43 in the afternoon, the elevator doors opened and 3 people stepped onto our floor. A tall woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair, led the group, flanked by 2 men carrying sleek briefcases. I recognized her immediately from the company website. Eleanor Caldwell, Chief Operations Officer of Aegis Enterprises. The entire office fell silent. Eleanor's gaze swept the room before landing on me. She walked directly to my desk, her heels clicking sharply against the laminate flooring. "Julian Vance," she asked, though it was clear she knew exactly who I was. "Yes," I replied, standing up to welcome her in. "I am Eleanor Caldwell. These are Michael Berg and Jason Winters from our audit team. Is there somewhere private we can speak?" Reginald emerged from his office so quickly he nearly tripped. "Miss Caldwell, what an unexpected pleasure. I am Reginald Thorne, regional manager. We were not notified of your visit. I would have prepared." "That was intentional, Mr. Thorne." Eleanor cut him off without even turning to look at him. "We will need your conference room immediately." Of course," Reginald stammered, gesturing toward the room where his team still sat, now staring wide-eyed at the corporate delegation. "Just give us a moment to clear out." "Actually," Eleanor said, finally turning to acknowledge him, "you will stay right where you are. We will be speaking with Mr. Vance first, alone." The look Reginald gave me could have cut glass. Confusion, suspicion, and the first flickers of fear competed for dominance in his expression. Eleanor led me to a small meeting room at the opposite end of the floor. Once inside, with the door firmly closed, Eleanor turned to me with an intensity that was almost physical. "Your email contained some extremely serious allegations," she said without preamble. "Before we proceed, I need to know if you stand by everything you reported." "Every word," I replied steadily. "And you understand the consequences. This could result in terminations, possibly legal action." "I understand." She studied me for a long moment. "Most people in your position would have complained about workplace harassment. Your email did not mention a single personal grievance." "Because this is not about me," I said. "It is about systematic misconduct that is costing the company millions." A hint of approval flashed across her face. "Walk me through it." "Everything you have observed." For the next hour, I presented my findings to Eleanor and the auditors. I showed them the pattern of misrepresented performance metrics, such as how the regional branch reported a 23% growth in client retention when the actual number was closer to 7%. I demonstrated how certain operational costs were being concealed through creative accounting. Most significantly, I revealed evidence suggesting that Reginald had deliberately sabotaged integration efforts to maintain autonomy from Aegis Enterprises' oversight. "And this cost-saving proposal," Michael Berg said, reviewing one of my spreadsheets. "You are claiming potential savings of $2,300,000 annually, but the proposal submitted to headquarters projected only $800,000. "Yes," I confirmed. "The original analysis was mine. The numbers were altered before submission." Eleanor leaned forward. "Can you prove that?" I pulled out my personal tablet. "I keep backups of all my work. This is the original document with metadata showing creation date and authorship." I also explained that under corporate governance guidelines, the systematic alteration of official financial records and reporting fraudulent metrics to headquarters constituted a material breach of fiduciary duty. Under corporate policy, this behavior was considered fraud and could render Reginald's employment agreement void ab initio, potentially triggering the forfeiture of his performance bonuses under the faithless servant doctrine. As they reviewed my evidence, comparing it to official records, their expressions grew increasingly grave. Jason Winters whispered something to Eleanor, who nodded sharply. "We have seen enough for now," she said finally. "Mr. Vance, we will need you to remain available, but return to your desk. Act normally. Say nothing about this meeting to anyone." When I emerged from the room, 5 pairs of eyes tracked my movement back to my desk. Reginald immediately approached Eleanor as she exited, his smile strained and artificial. "Miss Caldwell, now that you have spoken with Julian, perhaps we could discuss whatever concerns brought you here today." "Certainly, Mr. Thorne," Eleanor replied coolly. "Your entire team, conference room, 5 minutes." As Reginald gathered his team, Clara brushed past my desk, leaning down as if retrieving something she had dropped. "What did you tell them?" she hissed, her voice barely audible. I looked up from my computer screen, meeting her gaze directly. "The truth." The color drained from her face. "What truth?" "The one in the numbers," I replied simply, returning my attention to my screen. For the next 3 hours, Eleanor and the auditors remained closed in the conference room with Reginald and his team. Occasionally, raised voices penetrated the glass walls, though the words remained indistinct. Twice, Reginald emerged to retrieve files from his office, his movements jerky with tension, his face increasingly drawn. At 6:12 in the evening, the conference room door opened. The team filed out, their expressions a mixture of shock, anger, and fear. Reginald remained seated, his head in his hands. Eleanor approached my desk once more. "We will need you to come in early tomorrow, at 7:30 in the morning. We have more questions." I nodded. "I will be here." As Eleanor and the auditors departed, an oppressive silence fell over the office. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then slowly Simon approached my desk. "You did this," he said, his voice flat with disbelief. "You reported us." "I reported discrepancies in our operational data," I corrected him. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Chloe joined him, her voice breaking. "They are talking about an entire departmental audit, possible fraud investigations." "That sounds like a company decision based on their findings," I replied evenly. Felix stood nearby, shaking his head. "We were just having a little fun with you. The sign was just a joke." "What sign?" I asked, genuinely confused for a moment before realizing. "Oh, you mean the loser note?" I never mentioned that to anyone. Their faces registered collective shock as the implications sank in. This was not about their bullying at all. This was about their work, their actual professional conduct. Clara approached last, her arms crossed defensively. "Reginald built this team from nothing. 8 years of his life dedicated to this branch. We have been family. Families do not lie to each other," I said quietly, "or steal from each other, or sabotage each other's work." "We never stole anything," she protested, "misrepresenting performance metrics to secure bonuses you have not earned. Concealing operational inefficiencies to avoid oversight, taking credit for others' work while altering their findings. What would you call it?" She had no answer. I packed up my things and stood to leave. As I walked toward the elevator, Reginald finally emerged from the conference room. He looked decades older than he had that morning. "Julian," he called after me, his voice ragged. "Wait." I paused, turning to face him. "Whatever they offered you, promotion, bonus, transfer, I can match it. Better yet, I can make things very comfortable for you here. No more misunderstandings. You will be a valued team member. I promise." There it was, the bargaining phase. I almost felt sorry for him. "It is not about what I want, Reginald. It is about what you did." "They will dismantle everything," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. 8 years of work gone. People will lose their jobs. Is that what you want?" "What I want," I replied carefully, "is a workplace where performance is measured honestly, where credit is given where it is due, and where integration with the parent company is not viewed as an invasion to be repelled. That is all I have ever wanted." I left him standing there, surrounded by his crumbling kingdom. That night, my phone rang continuously. Reginald, Clara, even Chloe. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to their increasingly desperate messages. Threats gave way to pleas, then to bargaining, and finally to outright begging. "Please." Clara's final message trembled. "Just tell us what you want, we can fix this." But they could not fix this. Not anymore. I slept surprisingly well that night, better than I had in months. Whatever happened next, I had done what needed to be done. The truth was out, and now it would have its day. Morning arrived with a clarity I had not experienced in months. I arrived at the office at 7:30 in the morning, finding Eleanor Caldwell and Alistair Sinclair, the chief executive officer, waiting for me. We stepped into Reginald's office, where Alistair got straight to the point. "Eleanor shared your findings. You discovered discrepancies that went unnoticed for nearly 3 years. That is remarkable work." I explained that being underestimated had its advantages. He asked why I had not reported the harassment. I replied that it was not personal. It was about the operational integrity of the branch. Alistair nodded in approval. He told me Reginald would be terminated immediately and that 2 others would follow. Then, he offered me the position of interim branch director to oversee the transition. I was hesitant, pointing out that the team would never accept my authority. Alistair countered that their acceptance was not required, only their compliance or their resignation letters. Eleanor agreed, stating they needed someone who understood how to fix the division without being manipulated. I asked what the position would entail. Alistair explained. It was a 3-month appointment as interim branch director with full operational authority, reporting directly to Eleanor, accompanied by a substantial salary adjustment. Recognizing the chance to rebuild this toxic environment, I accepted. Alistair stood and shook my hand. At 8:30 in the morning, Reginald walked in and froze, his face turning pale as he saw Alistair behind his desk. Alistair informed him that I was taking over as interim director. What followed was a clinical termination. Alistair laid out the evidence, falsified metrics, obstructed integration, and forged reports. When Reginald tried to defend himself, Alistair slid a folder forward, offering 2 choices: sign a standard waiver with a 4-week severance, or face immediate termination for cause with potential legal action for corporate fraud. Reginald glared at me, muttering that I had ruined him. Alistair corrected him, stating his own actions were responsible. Security then escorted him out to clear his desk. Next, Clara was called in. Confronted with the evidence, she dissolved into tears, claiming she was only following Reginald's orders. She was terminated by the end of the day. Simon, Chloe, and Felix received formal warnings due to their peripheral involvement. By noon, Reginald and Clara were gone, their badges deactivated. Alistair departed, leaving Eleanor behind to help me establish authority. She warned me that I would face resistance from the remaining staff. I told her I was counting on it. That afternoon, Eleanor called a full staff meeting. She announced that I was the new interim branch director with complete authority to reorganize operations and implement new protocols. She added that, over the next 2 weeks, I would conduct individual performance reviews to determine who stayed. Silence filled the room as they realized their professional futures rested entirely in my hands. My first meeting was with Simon, who entered my office with visible dread. I opened his file and praised his competitive analysis on the Westridge account, which identified a potential 30% increase in revenue. When I asked why he had not presented it, he admitted Reginald had dismissed it as too aggressive. I told him I had scheduled a meeting with Westridge for the next morning and wanted him to lead the presentation. He was stunned, asking about his job. I explained that I was not interested in his past under Reginald, but in his future under my leadership, where performance would be rewarded and credit properly assigned. I held similar meetings with Chloe and Felix, addressing their strengths and clarifying my expectations. Over the next 6 weeks, the office atmosphere shifted from toxic competition to collaboration. Information flowed freely, client retention rose by 12%, and operational costs fell by 8%. Eleanor visited, expressing corporate satisfaction, and offered me the permanent director position. I thanked her and asked for a few days to consider it. The next morning, I called Eleanor and Alistair. I accepted the role on one condition: complete restructuring authority to redesign the branch's function. I explained that the regional branch model was obsolete and fostered territorial behavior. I proposed dissolving it entirely, creating specialized, cross-regional teams. I projected a 27% reduction in company-wide operational costs within 18 months. Impressed by the numbers, Alistair agreed. The following Monday, I announced to the team that the regional branch was being dissolved. Instead, we were transitioning to a cross-regional pilot model. Simon was promoted to head strategic analysis, Chloe to lead client relations, and Felix to join the technical integration team. Stunned by their promotions, Chloe asked why I was doing this after how they had treated me. I told them this was for everyone who had ever been underestimated. Simon realized I did not want simple revenge. I wanted change. I explained that by transforming the company, I had made managers like Reginald obsolete, ensuring their old bullying tactics would never work again. They kept their jobs, but they would work under my system. 3 months later, client satisfaction was up by 31%, and operational efficiency had improved by 22%. Eleanor visited to tell me the board was implementing my model across all regions. She noted that instead of punishing my bullies, I had fixed the system that allowed them to thrive. I smiled, replying that changing the rules of the game was the ultimate victory. Sometimes the best response to being labeled a loser is redefining what winning means. The person underestimated today might be redesigning your world tomorrow. Subscribe for more stories of justice and comment below on how you turned a negative experience into positive change. Sometimes the best revenge is not getting even, it is getting better.